following podcast is recorded and produced by Emerge, a media creators co-op, in affiliation with the network at bicbp-radio.com.
Welcome to the Double Fist Punch Podcast, the only podcast where we teach you how to fight. Unfortunately, we're skipping the episode where a bunch of that happens. So
we're not skipping it.
Well,
we're coming back to it.
Yes, we're coming back to
delaying
it.
it.
Yes.
That episode would be
The Seed.
The Seed. So we decided that when we do this one, we're going to do a watch party.
Yeah,
We'll do more of a reacts.
Yeah.
Than style.
I actually have an email.
Okay. Wow.
So, yes.
From a fan.
Yes.
From the fan.
From the fan. Yeah.
This is great. This is a monumental occasion here. Right. I do have another friend that watches. I don't think this is the person who sent the email though, so I'm just shocked.
No.
Okay, what did they have to say?
All right, this was in relation to the episode about the penal colony. I forget exactly which episode that was. Like this one where they go down to the penal colony,
right,
the mind wipes.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember.
That's the one where the dagger of the mind.
Yeah.
Dagger of the mind.
All right. So this is what they.
I love you, Helen. I love you, Helen. I've always loved you.
Yeah.
We got go busy after the Thanksgiving party.
So this is what they have to say. I have always heard that the episodes of Star Trek commented a lot about the current social issues happening at the time of filming. The treatment of mentally ill people, how it changed them on the penal colony. I heard a comment on electric shock therapy. It would be great if you could bring those out, like you did in your discussion of the Jim Crow laws and Uhura and her roles. Having strong female roles was a comment in itself, even if they stopped the networks by having them all beautiful.
Right.
Love the details of the podcast and the filming discussions. Great podcast with little-known facts.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Who is that? Do you mind? Okay, never mind. We'll keep it secret.
That is my mother.
Oh, that's great. Well, hey, that's right. Hey, she likes it, and obviously, so does your mom watch a lot of Star Trek? I assume.
Oh yeah.
Great. So that's kind of like how you got into it, so to speak.
I would.
Did you find it on your own?
Yeah, I kind of found it on my own. I always kind of like had it as a like an older person thing for a while, and then I just kind of started watching it one day because it was on. Yeah. And that's
kind of like my son. I mean, I think he didn't really like Star Trek because the old man watched it, and then he got a little bit, but he really likes the storytelling, especially the old series. And we often talk about that, like. I think, what was the one episode we were talking about? ESP. He had never heard of ESP. Like 20-something-year-olds don't know what ESP is. I think they call it something else now. They don't call it ESP. Like
that was the
whatever. Like
first episode, right?
Yeah, that was the first episode. Cool. Thanks for Mom for sending an email. We got a couple fans. So So I'm excited for Spacey. We can see if maybe we can have obviously it's so important. Obviously because of the movie, The Wrath of Khan. But also because of the implications of some of the characters that have continued into, some of the other series. Like, so they've definitely created a lot of lore with that episode.
Yeah, there was a lot of lore in that episode. Like, we get a lot of dates, but I think we've discussed this before. You kind of have to take the dates given by Star Trek with like a grain of salt. Just they do get retconned, and
they find great ways on Voyager and then on Strange New Worlds to talking about why the timeline is wrong.
Yeah.
And they used Voyager. There's some great episodes where Voyager travels back to 1996, which is when that should have happened. But they find out that another guy that had kind of basically stolen some time devices has screwed up the timeline. So the timeline, and they kind of steal from Doctor Who that the time is trying to always fix itself.
Mm-hmm.
Even Spock says, in the episode City on the Edge of Forever, he talks about that time is like a river with eddies and back currents, and it wants to flow. And so those currents should bring Kirk and Spock somewhere near where McCoy causes the change in the timeline. So Star Trek has been pretty good, like with the way they use time. Not always. Sometimes they're like, what? But I think like definitely that'll be interesting. When we ever get to that stuff, we'll definitely talk about some of that. So
yeah. So what we have here is Return of the Archons, which is this bottom
yes,
artwork there. So we have a summary here. Group mind control threatens the Enterprise crew. I guess we're just getting right into it.
Yep.
When the Enterprise visits Beta 3 to learn what happened to the USS Archon a century ago, Kirk and company find a planet of blissful people controlled by Landru, an omniscient ruler. Landru absorbed the Archons into the body, a fate that awaits Kirk's crew unless he can find a way to destroy Landru. And he'd better hurry. The Enterprise is being pulled from orbit. Gene Roddenberry took the name Archons from a social club he belonged to while in high school.
Oh, well, there you go.
I
did not know that, and I have owned that videotape for. I just probably never. I almost think I didn't ever read those because I knew what the episodes were. So I probably was buying the tape. I'm sure I bought this tape because of space. No, this was the one that came. This was Columbia House. For you millennials that don't know what Columbia House, I think that's the right generation. Columbia House was like you would get this tape once a month. The first one was like a penny. And then after that, you got once a month. And this in 1989 or maybe 90 was $26 for 2 episodes. So I don't want to hear anybody bitching about the cost of streaming services because you know how much hours of watch time you're getting for your $16 on Disney Plus or whatever it might be. I'm paying $26 in $1990. I don't even know what inflation is for 2 episodes. And I was like, that's a deal. So sorry.
It was a rough year. It was a rough time to be a Star Trek fan.
It was a rough time. Well, because it was still on TV and stuff, but this was like VHS, so you could throw it in and watch it whenever you want. So
yeah, so I guess we'll get the B plot out of the way as quickly as possible. There is like a slight like purge that happens, and then that just gets dropped. It's
well,
festival.
apparently I think they say how often that happens. It's not every day, but there's like
monthly.
It's
maybe?
like there's I'm sure they do. And we probably missed it, but there's definitely like. They built into the system, kind of like the movie The Purge. And I don't know if The Purge have ever seen this episode and they stole it. Like, I don't know. Like, I've never looked into that. But it's kind of like The Purge, that 1 hour, right? It's not even. It's more than an hour.
I think it's a night.
It's a night, and they can do whatever they want. But it's really only the younger people.
Yeah, it's
like
the older people stay in the house.
Yeah, they kind of bunker down.
Yeah, and you have to. It looks like you have to participate in this too.
It feels, but the difference between this and The Purge, you know, to just if we're going with that analogy, is that there is mental control by Landru. You are of the body. Like most people are being controlled by whatever that mechanism is, and it's the computer, and I'm sure there's something within the atmosphere. I don't think they yada yada that a little bit.
Yeah.
But whereas in The Purge you choose to go out. Like it's more of like you act within society, and then those 12 hours, whatever it is in the overnight, you're not going to get arrested, so do whatever you want. Where this is more like almost like a release valve. Right?
Yeah, it seems like what they were trying to get at is that the this
Yes.
festival is like a way to release pent up emotion that Landru suppresses.
Right.
And I guess this is like just something that affects younger people more than older people, which I guess makes sense in a way. The Purge, like, maybe for this, like, this mind control thing, it makes sense. I never agreed with the philosophy of the Purge, like, at all.
Right.
But, like, you know, for this, with mind control and, like, it's almost
well, there's no
magical.
choice, and society's not developing, because they certainly talk about the fact of whether they should be interfering with the society. Yeah. Well, they already interfered with the Federation, because obviously well, it's not a Federation ship back then, but, like, the USS Archon, which is there's a lot of ships that didn't have success.
Yeah.
Trek, that went somewhere and then disappeared. And this was probably the first one. And then so he already kind of feels like he has, and obviously he has to save the ship. So like there is that aspect of it too. It's the episode starts pretty cool. Like I'm happy for like George Takei because he gets like kind of cool acting opportunity in this. And there are a lot of like secondary characters that I wish we would have seen again. Like that became other characters. I think they were trying to figure out who the other guy next to Sulu was going to be. And obviously it ended up being Chekhov. But I feel like, is it the Sales or whatever the guy is? I feel like the other guy, the one, it's like, your daughter's out there. Like, it's like, in future seasons, nobody gets those lines. Like, those characters we barely have those kind of one-off secondary characters in future episodes.
Yeah, they play with they like to bring out the characters that,
right,
just to add flavor to the show.
And I wish they would have done more of that because I like some of these characters, like the one that's in the Gorn episode that's like a little close for one of those beauties, Captain. Like when they're doing like Mortar, and then this one you got that guy, and the guy is he's not just like cannon fodder in the back like sometimes the security guards are. Like this one is actually like it's kind of cool. There's a lot of cool stuff in this episode. I really do. I think we made fun. We talked about this episode wasn't very good, but I'm backing off on that a little bit. I think it's because are you going to festival?
Yeah.
Your daddy is going. You're like, what is that? Like, there's some real that one creepy guy throws me off a little bit.
Yeah, festival was like it. It really didn't have anything at all to do with the episode. Like, they could have just completely cut the festival out of the entire thing and, like...
I think it's the first thing for them to realize that this society is pretty fucked up.
I mean...
Excuse my language.
I would have thought the dude's just kind of walking around like,
I think it's almost built in to show that the manipulative nature of Landru. That he allowed, like, that this is, I think that would make sense. I think that's probably, like, they don't discuss that enough, but I think it's a great plot point in terms of get them, that first moment. Because then even later on when they're wandering around and everybody's kind of looking like they're going to pick up equipment, like, the fact that, sticks and stuff to beat him, like, the fact that he can just do whatever he wants. Like, I almost feel like when they're doing the festival, does Landru tell them to do that, to go and rape and kill and attack, or is it just like their brains releasing the pent up? I don't like. There's not enough. We don't have enough information about any of that.
Yeah, they don't really like expunge on any of that at all.
Right. I mean, I guess that's more of a theory on our own, I guess.
Yeah, I think you're right on on the latter. Like it's not something that Landru like actively pursues, but like it's just like maybe the computer. By the way, it's a computer.
Right. Wait, it is? Wait. It turns out that the computer's behind all of this on Star Trek. Yeah. Although, admittedly, this is the first time.
Yeah.
This is the first big computer that has too much power.
Yeah. Also, like they wrote the computer very well. Like it, like with earlier Star Trek. Like I brought this up, way back in the first episodes of this show. They would show the bad guy like right immediately.
Right.
This one they hinted at it for the entire time. Like the guys with the sticks, they're just incapable of making decisions basically if things don't fall into the proper parameters.
Right.
And like that was all.
And the sticks are pretty cool because they're not a weapon. They're just a hollow tube.
Yeah.
They just like. And there's a lot of weird stuff in this episode, which is kind of fun because it's not a technology they understand. It is more powerful than you expect it to be, even though they look like they're just walking around Mayberry. But there's definitely and that's why it makes sense that it's really damaging the Enterprise, and the Enterprise will be destroyed.
Landru is very advanced technology. Right. It seems not advanced in its computations apparently, but
it's really old.
Yeah. And
it's kind of he put his soul, as it were, or whatever, into the computer, but over time that's kind of de-evolved into just this technology thing. And we kind of got that with Roger Corby when he put his soul into the android, but then he was like, compute. Give me any equation to solve. And it's like he lost his humanity. Yeah. And if something like even that you referenced in the email, your mom referenced, was that one of the things of the 60s was we were worried about technology. And the good news is we don't have any of those concerns about technology ruining everything anymore.
No.
We don't have any concerns.
Oh.
Today, I have this little device, and there are no problems with this device at all with technology. It's perfect. It's we've learned to use technology in every way perfect.
Yeah, computers can't do anything.
They can't do anything. They don't think for themselves or write newspaper articles or anything. Like, they don't do anything like that. We're being sarcastic, in case anyone didn't catch that. My friend's dad passed away, and these weird AI obituaries kept popping up. And it's weird. Like, what is these? It's like, and they're weird. They're not written by a human being, and it's just creepy as hell, especially with an obituary. Like, they're written very coldly, but somehow trying to sound like they're written by a caring human. It's very bizarre. So it's interesting that, like, again, that already in this first season, that overuse of technology and genetics and mind control and all those things that were big issues in the 60s come out.
Yeah, I like to speak on the more societal aspects of the episode. I do like that this is a utopian society.
Right.
But, like, it's a dead society, you know?
Yes.
Like, it's completely peaceful all the time there, except for festival. But that's controlled. Like, I don't think anybody gets murdered during festival.
It's probably the like when the daughter comes home and like.
Yeah, that's not good.
It's not a good.
It's not good.
You know, I mean, whatever happened to her, and I don't want to get into the specifics what I think probably happened, but it's pretty scary, and I think it's pretty alarming the way they do that for its time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, I just looked it up. It's the festival, also known as the Red Hour on Planet Beta 3.
I guess it's an hour.
I thought it was longer. And then they all have to clean up. I do find that. Oh, and now pick up all the crap that you like. Whoever sells windows on that planet makes a shitload of money because there's a lot of broken windows.
Yeah.
There's a lot of shots of people breaking windows and stuff. So
yeah, we just get the
window guy's like the richest dude on Beta 3.
Yeah, Safe Life Repair.
Safe Life Repair.
Yeah.
That's great. That's like we make a big commercial for that.
Yeah.
It's your car. That's awesome. That'd be a great reel. A great TikTok right there. Like, did your windows get destroyed during that hour?
Yeah.
Your daddy can call Safe Light, and they come and repair your windows.
Festival. Yeah.
There are. I think that 30 seconds, that shot of like festival, and they're all going festival. Yeah. I think that's kind of where it falls. That's probably why I have like this weird reaction to this episode.
Yeah, that was a bad. I did not like that sequence. Like, it's just close-ups. It was just shots from close-ups, and there's a.
Right. Yeah, there is kind of a weird, like, I'm not sure about the director's choices in that one moment, but all right, let's move on. I'm getting silly over here. What'd you think of like some of the, like, kind of because they think they're kind of sneaking around, and it turns out Landu's like onto them. They meet a couple guys that were in kind of a like an underground, so to speak, and they have a really cool complex thing. So. Yeah, kind of like Nazi Germany, where they didn't like the rebellion or the whatever the guys don't know. The undergrounds don't know all the people within their group to insulate themselves.
Yeah, I thought that was very interesting. That that they kind of hinted at this underground aspect where they were doing it relatively advanced resistance tactics. Like effective resistance tactics. Obviously, probably because of budget reasons, there weren't very many of them. There were 3, right? I think.
We only know of those 3. Yeah.
So it seems like the cells were just like one person each, which, we get to expand on that a little in Deep Space Nine, but
I do like the thing where they go with the one guy underground, so to speak. And they're in hiding, and the guy brings out this like light panel, And he's like, this is old piece of technology from 1,000 years ago, whatever. And it was like, and then they start, Kirk and Spock and everybody starts to realize, oh, this was a society was very different. Like,
yeah,
he built this when they reset the society. But some of these little pieces of technology still kind of exist.
Yeah, I think it was like this kind of like almost a like pseudo like regressive like movement that took place at some point,
Right.
Probably led by the real Landru.
Right. Well, no, that's the idea, is that
yeah.
he was the philosopher that saved society, and they were destroying themselves. Just like, and again, that was supposed to be the allegory or whatever to Earth, that we were destroying ourselves, so that this one philosopher came out. And if you even think about the way the Vulcans are portrayed, it's the same thing. The Vulcans were a warrior race. They were all killing each other until
Serac, I think.
Serac, the philosophy of Serac changed everything and all that stuff. So,
yeah, I think the definite difference between the Vulcans and the
right.
I don't even know, SETI Alpha, whatever you would call them. I think there's an individualism to Vulcan philosophy, whereas this one is more like a hive mind.
Right.
Which it seems like it must draw a lot of energy from Landru to actively control people, which is why it seems like it kind of like just lets the indoctrination be the thing that keeps loyalty, especially for older people.
Sure. Yeah.
Because they're the ones that are doing the resistance.
Right. And most of the older people seem like they don't participate in the festival anymore, but they're so indoctrinated to the system that they don't. Like that one guy that goes and tells them, "Ooh, you mock, you mock Landru," and and that guy gets the one guy killed, so to speak. There's some really cool things in this episode. The one thing that I think is hilarious at one point Spock just clubs a guy. He just like up and up like, and the music's boom, like it's this dramatic. Spock just like whack, like it's just a great physical, and he was pissed. Like he looked pissed. It's like, where's the Mocha neck pinch? Like he just kind of like wails on that guy, knocks him out. There's some really cool stuff in that episode. Even this fact, because society doesn't know how to handle the rebellion, so to speak. Like if the people would just rebel quicker.
Yeah, Landru doesn't have like the computational ability to actually deal with something like that. Like
and that's essentially how they were able to defeat him.
Yeah, like Landru, like maybe at some point it was better equipped for resistance, and maybe that particular subroutine just kind of faded over time. But like they're just like the dudes with the sticks, they come in and they're like, "You will obey," and then Kirk's like, no. And then they're just like,
"Perhaps you do not understand.
You must not have understood."
We will rephrase the question.
You will obey now. Yes. And then he's like, no.
And then they were able to adjust.
Yeah.
And then Spock even says, like, I don't think we can count on that working again.
Yeah.
The computer makes an adjustment. It's neat. There's some really good stuff. And then I think even when they actually, with the one dude that's willing, like the one guy was originally all into the rebellion, and then when he actually gets pressed.
Yeah, the younger of the older guys, right?
Like he's like, come on, stab out of him. He's like, I'm sorry. And then Kirk does the little mini speech, like, freedom isn't free.
I think I really like. What did you think of the interpretation of the Prime Directive here? Like, I don't know if the Prime Directive was directly referenced, like, as the Prime Directive, but he was definitely talking about it.
I don't think they say point blank the Prime Directive, but like, there's a debate whether they should be interfering with the society, and the Prime Directive is pretty clear because it says like about appropriate developing societies.
Yeah, do not interfere with the development of society.
But it's not. This is not.
It's a stagnant society.
It's a stagnant society because of the computer, and I think that's why Kirk kind of feels like he can get away with it. I'm actually looking up like the Prime Directive, also known as Starfleet General Order Number 1. The Prime Directive mandates that Starfleet personnel and spacecraft are prohibited from interfering with normal development of any society, and that any Starfleet vessel or crew is expendable to prevent violation of this rule. So,
that was not a normally developing society. But it,
it references that the Prime Directive was talked about in Piece of Action, which is the gangster one, as well as the Nazi Germany one. And then also the Exeter on Omega Glory when they find like the Earth parallel with America and all that stuff. And then it does reference say that the Prime Directive was arguably broken in Return of the Archons, States of Armageddon, the Apple. But once again, the argument is that the Prime Directive also doesn't apply with advanced planets. No. So Taste of Armageddon in the next episode, this is an advanced planet. They have space travel. So the Prime Directive doesn't apply to those planets. It's mainly for societies that are not developing, that are younger.
I think it also prohibits interference of the political machinations of powers like Cardassia, for example.
Right.
I remember that being a thing in Deep Space Nine, where they're like, yeah, we can't really influence Cardassia's internal politics.
Right.
Which, obviously Section 31 was probably doing that, but
right. Well, yeah, that's a good point.
But
no, I think that's interesting. I think that's a good point. Like, Kirk makes the value. I'm assuming that when this happens, he has to send a report in, and then they clear him. It's like SVU. Well, it was a good shooting. Like it was like he didn't do anything wrong.
Yeah,
because otherwise the show's over. But he makes a value decision that we already interfered with society because the Archons were already here. Kind of like in the Piece of the Action, like that happens a few times. Where we have to clean up the mess that we started. Not that the Archons made a mess, because they obviously were just absorbed by Landru and everything, and that we have to assume that the people from that ship ended up in that society or were killed. I think that I think this is a fair example of where Kirk makes the decision, a command decision, that Landru the computer has gotten to the point where the society is not developing, and these people are essentially like slaves, so to speak. So that's why I think he probably gets away with breaking the Prime Directive here.
Yeah. Do you think that? What do you think Picard would do in this situation? I don't think he. I think eventually they would come to that conclusion, but I think Picard would have to be dragged into that conclusion.
Yeah, I feel like that's an interesting thing. I feel like Picard would have been like his solution would have been more of him similar to what Kirk ended up doing with the computer, but like getting the computer to change its ways.
Yeah.
Like not self-destruct. Yeah. Kirk gets it to like, you're bad, kill yourself. Like gets it to commit suicide. He cyberbullies the computer. And then where Picard would be like, don't you understand? I will play my flute and you will decide to like it would be definitely and again, that's the difference between Picard and Kirk, which was obviously written specifically to make them very different. No, I think it's a good point. I think Cisco would have gone in there and probably punched it. And it would have been taking care of it.
Picard, Cisco would have just shot it.
Cisco is kind of Kirky.
But
probably even more so at times.
What I liked about what Kirk did there was that he's just like, yeah, but like what society have you built here, computer? What? And the computer's like, it just doesn't have an answer for him. He's just, it's peaceful. Well, is that a good society, computer? And the computer's like,
and you're actually harming the body.
Yeah.
And then Spock poses a question to the computer, and the computer can't answer the question. So I like that Spock kind of jumps in.
Yeah,
I like Kirk's snarky attitude though. He goes like, you guys might want to get a new job.
Yeah.
You get out those robes and get a new job. I'm like, whoa. Their society was just irreparably changed, and you're harassing guys. Yeah. You're harassing guys.
I think Dr. What was it, Lindstrom?
Oh, Lindstrom, yeah.
He was one of the Archons, right? Or was he just I watched like the first 10 minutes of the episode like fairly long time.
Oh, Lindstrom, I don't think he's a doctor. I think he's just like one of the crewmen. Is he the one who runs?
They told Lindstrom to kind of like monitor things. I think.
Yeah, that's right.
So I'm kind of wondering what I'm trying to remember what his position was.
Yeah.
But like the fact that the Archons, the fact that in the Return of the Archons, he just totally just tears this computer apart. Right, just their entire society is collapsed. Somehow all of this just results in like a few scuffles instead of like widespread panic.
Right.
And he's just
No, but you're right. Lindstrom's the psychiatrist. He's a sociologist. He stays back with like other crew members. I'm assuming it's somebody went and brought them.
Yeah,
came back and checked on them.
Yeah, I assume it's like the same thing.
Lindstrom
as...
stays there to help the culture. It says here he later stays behind on the planet to help the population establish an independent society after the deactivation of the planetary computer, which had controlled them for a millennium.
Yeah.
So, he's a psychologist.
Yeah. That society would definitely need help after all that. Like
they tend to do that though. Like most of these episodes, even on Next Generation and other shows, they leave a group of people behind.
Yeah.
To like, and I even like the guys. Yeah, we even had a couple domestic squabbles and stuff already. Like, but it's human, and that's really kind of the point that like, it's kind of the free will thing that you can't have a God. God gives us free will. Like if you're a religious person, why does God allow car accidents? Well, and the philosophy be, well, God gave us free will. And I don't want to argue about whether God exists or not, but the argument for free will is that God gave us the ability to create a car, and then we should also create laws because God gave us that free will and guidance through the Bible and through other religious things, and that's why that happens.
Yeah. Either way, like you definitely like freedom allows you creativity, which is something that Kirk explicitly brings up.
So I don't think that he would have ever gotten in trouble, like even in like, obviously if this was a real thing, I don't think Kirk would have gotten in trouble because especially also find out that they like essentially murdered the crew of the Archon. Like the crew was like essentially absorbed or killed.
Ship probably destroyed, and you know
it's kind of neat. Like I think this is a pretty good episode. It's better than I remembered. I like the fact that they actually put on the appropriate period costumes and being down in their uniforms like we're wearing. I think like there's some cool episodes between Kirk and Scotty. Nimoy, DeForest Kelly has a couple things like "You're not of the body," and he has to like punch his friend in the face or whatever he has to do. And
Sulu's just kind of up on the ship the entire time, just kind of like, "Hi, how are you?"
He's like, "Put a guard on Sulu." He's like, "On Sulu?" Like it's kind of like he's like, "Yeah, just keep an eye on him," like because he doesn't know how much maybe like Landru could make Sulu even up in the ship get up and go and cause damage to the ship. Like, because that's part of the way the computer was processing and stuff. So it's a good episode. I don't know. It's pretty good.
Yeah. So I think that about covers Return of the Archons.
Yes.
I can't think of anything else I wanted to bring up necessarily.
I think that's
So time to get on to another utopian society.
We have another
which
Oh,
this is
I've always liked this. I've always liked this episode.
Yeah, it's a beautiful episode.
It has one of my favorite. I just posted. I watched this episode the other day.
Yeah.
And then I posted my favorite. One of my favorite Spock moments of all times is in this episode. I really like this episode, but Spock does something freaking hilarious in this episode, which I just love. But go ahead. Do you want to?
Trying to remember which.
Well, when we get to it, I'll bring it up. Let's just start with the episode. I think I have to read it in this.
Yeah,
thing, so.
I don't think.
I don't have the VHS for this one. So let's see how terrible the description is on this one. Taste of Armageddon. The Enterprise is caught in a bizarre interplanetary war fought entirely by computers, but with real deaths. And that's how we get.
That's the entire thing?
That's not a great.
All right,
it's not a great description. But most of the ones in this book aren't great. So,
I'll give a better summary. So basically, they show up on this planet and they're pursuing another lost ship, actually, because like what was it, 100 years ago, another ship showed up at this planet, disappeared.
Right.
So they're there again with this diplomat who's
Right.
just the biggest asshole ever.
The Valiant.
Yeah,
The Valiant.
the
was
Valiant
ship that
disappears, and they get there, and basically immediately something's wrong. They beam down. They're like, okay, so why?
Well, they're told not to beam
yeah,
down.
they're
told to
not
stay away.
Yeah, they're told to stay
Right.
away, and they get there, and they're like, well, we told you, but as long as you're here, we might as well show you around. So during this, they get attacked. There's an attack that happens, quote unquote, and essentially they're like, they see like little lights appear on a war map of some kind,
Right.
and then another one, which I assume is a space map.
Right.
And they're like, oops, your ship is dead, and millions of our people are, or 500,000 of our people are dead.
Right.
So what it turns out is that they're not actually attacking each other with actual weapons. They're just simulating combat.
There's
and,
two computers that pretend to have a war, and the treaty has allowed them. That's going on for whatever 500 years or whatever it is. That like if we tell you lost 50 people, then then your 50 people commit suicide essentially within these like disintegration chambers.
Yeah, they got the disintegration booths,
right.
which are.
So it's weird because I've always theorized in this episode the reason why the Enterprise gets caught in this is because the other planet saw this big ship show up at that planet, and they were like, "What's this ship doing here? All right, fire our virtual attack, and let's take that ship out because of those people. Why are they going to that planet and not coming here?" So they were kind of like thought that they were going to be betrayed. So that's why they purposely attack, I think, the Enterprise. Because then they try to tell them not to come, but now the Kirk's there, and they're like, "You're gonna have to beam down and all that stuff."
Yeah, so
to have your crew commit suicide.
Yeah, the crux of the episode really kind of went over like gentlemen's agreements in war.
Sure.
Like
yeah, sure, yeah, that's a good point.
It's kind of like there are historical analogies to this, but like it's such an extreme example that like I can't really pick out anything,
right?
Because I guess if you wanted to pick something, it's selecting two champions from an army and having them duel, and then
Sure.
The loser surrenders, and
Right.
Nobody has to no villages need to be
Right.
burned down.
Yeah, you don't have to
killed.
kill your crops, and we don't have to have starvation. And at some point, this has just gotten to the point where everybody's just too easy to accept it. It's become established in society that some people just have to go and commit suicide. It's kind of like Logan's Run, a little bit, the movie Logan's Run, where you get to a certain age and then you just have to you in Logan's Run you get to a certain age, I think it's like 35 or something, and then you just die. Like you go into a thing and you commit suicide because you're too old for society. That's kind of that's a 1974 film that came out. So I mean, yeah, there's definitely like a lot of those kinds of concepts that are thought about in the 60s and the early 70s. This is just one of those things, like this war by this theoretical war games or whatever, and I they're all just so used to it. That they don't even question it. They don't even question it, which is kind of an interesting thing.
Yeah, that was the thing with it.
We get the first of our guys you want to punch in the face.
Oh, yes.
Ambassador Fox. You just want to punch that guy in the face.
Yeah, he is just utterly convinced that there is nothing wrong with this planet.
Or that he can't fix himself.
Yeah.
Like his hubris is just like, diplomacy is best left the diplomats. Like he's really impressed with himself in this.
Yeah, he's. I think that was a cool bit where, Kirk, quote unquote, gives an order to the ship. Everybody's getting shore leave. Everybody beam down. We're gonna beam up some people from what was it?
Whatever the planet.
Whatever they were called.
Right.
And everybody's gonna exit the ship, and Scotty's just like, no, that's not an order that would be given by Kirk.
Right.
So they immediately check the audio file, and they're like, yeah, that's not Kirk.
Right.
And
Fox says, "Oh, a misunderstanding," and like blah 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 blah, and at one point he's like, tells Scotty, and Scotty's like, the screens stay up.
Yeah.
Like he refuses to put the ship at risk until he knows that the captain's okay. So he's like, you can do whatever you want. There is one big plot point that always comes up on social media when this episode ever gets talked about. Is like, how did Fox beam down to the planet?
I don't think the shield's beaming was a thing yet.
I'm pretty sure that he tells him to lower the shields so he can beam down. And Scotty says, I'm not putting the screens down to let anybody. So somehow Fox and his assistant are able to beam down through the shields. So I don't know. It's not a big deal.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a continuity thing that I'm not going to make a big deal about because there's got to be those things.
Yeah.
It just kind of happens. I know that at one point Scotty's smart enough to. Well, that doesn't come till later on when they get to General Order 24, which is one of the coolest things ever. I love the General Order 24 is just like awesome because it's like it's really. Are you really going to do that? But like, you got to have it in the books.
Yeah, there's just a rule in Starfleet handbook. Orbital bombardment, extermination,
extermination, and it's
exterminatus.
And I'm sure that this was not the context of when it would be expected to be used. But Kirk plays his hand. This is a poker move. I don't think Kirk really was planning. I think he would have tried to cancel this if he needed to, if it wasn't going to work. Or he said, well, you know what? Oh, well, like, I'm not going to let my crew die, especially since they were attacking his ship. But, I mean, when I think Kirk realizes early on how to play this. And he doesn't really want to do this. Like, because they go and they're put in they're taking hostage and they're put in that room. And there's two really great episodes of Spock in this episode. The Vulcan mind meld through the wall is great. Like, I just love the Vulcan mind meld through the wall. It's a great sequence. It's shot really well, and it's performed really well. As Nimoy is like kind of is working its way, and even the actor has the Vulcan mind meld, and he's kind of like, and then he just kind of slowly, and he's not like robotic. It's just kind of like.
It's a trance almost.
It's a trance, and the actor in the directing was well done. And I like that. Then they just, and then Kirk says to him after that works, he says, Mr. Spock, we're going to need more weapons. Yeah. And he doesn't say, like, let's go get some more guns. Like, he's like, we're going to, and Spock's like, I understand. Like, like there's a neat aspect of that. Yeah. And that leads to my favorite moment, one of my favorite Spock moments of all time. And you gotta watch this clip because, so they're there in the hallway and they stop. What's her face? The Barbara Hershey, whatever the actress's name, not Barbara Hershey, but that actress that was on like Hill Street Blues many years later, and I love that actress. And he's like, you can't go in there. And he's like, I have to. He's like, no, you're not. So Spock walks over there, and while Spock's walking over
I know
there,
what you're talking about.
Kirk's got a smirk on his face. Yeah. Like if you watch the episode back, Kirk's like, he's like, oh, this is gonna be great. And Spock walks, excuse me, sir. You have a multi-legged creature crawling on your shoulder. And the guy looks at it, he gives him the Vulcan neck pinch. And the music that's associated, boom, like this really dramatic music too. And Spock just like nonchalantly catches him and walks him out of the camera shot after he knocks him out. And then he grabs the weapon. And meanwhile, they cut back to a shot of Shatner, and Shatner's just smirking again. Like, I'm sure they shot those two shots at the same time. But it's like Kirk loved this. He thought it was hilarious. Like, it's almost like they have this worked out. Like they've done this before. They're going to use this again. And it's like, but Spock can't lie. His Vulcans can't lie. And I'm like, okay, whatever. And then he grabs the thing, and then he's like, everyone move. And then they blow up a couple of disintegration chambers. And this guy just, it's funny, Amir 7 or whatever his name is, like, they don't know how to handle resistance. There's no resistance to this in their society. So he doesn't know what to do.
Yeah, they're just kind of standing there. Like, Spock, when he does that, just kind of walks directly up to the guy. Like, he doesn't come up behind him, just walks straight up to him. He's just kind of standing there. Like, he didn't even have to do that. He could have just, like...
taking the gun out of his hand.
Basically, he just said, give me this.
Yeah, but it's so much better that he just walks up and says this most ridiculous. He doesn't say spider. It's so Spock. And then there's another one in this episode too, when they're leaving, and the only person they're leaving in the room is the yeoman and the girl and the woman, and he's like, yeoman, I think Tamara, I think her name is like, do not let her leave. sit on her if you have to.
Yeah.
Like, Spock's like so literal in his directions in this episode. Like,
knock her down.
And sit on her.
If
like
necessary.
I wish we came back and there was a moment where she's laying there and the woman's just sitting on her. Like Yeoman Tamar's just sitting on her.
Yeah. Is it the last time we see Yeoman Tamar?
I think that's the only time we see Yeoman Tamar.
Oh, she's there a lot. She has a lot of lines actually. I don't really know like.
And again, this is one of those things that I think in these early episodes. We had a lot of characters that were coming and going.
Yeah, maybe they were trying out to see like what the audience reaction would be to like because
we talk about like Commander Kyle and Commander Leslie and Yeoman Rand and characters that had a little bit more screen time, but there's a lot of other characters that came and went that were kind of interesting characters and a lot of different backgrounds and races, and I don't know, I like this. I mean, I thought she was, there's some really good ones in this one.
Yeah, they pull in this, she's like, I believe a Japanese-American actress.
Probably.
And like, way more, like, I think she had a Japanese accent, I think.
Yep.
Like, so, like, it was even more so than, like, Sulu.
Sure.
I don't really think we see her ever again.
Right.
But it's interesting that they pulled her in because I imagine it was like almost like a trial run for that character.
She's only in one episode.
All right. Well, that answers that.
Well, it's Miko Mayama, member of the Enterprise Landing Party in episode Days of Armageddon. I mean, she might have been a background character of the actress, and maybe this one she just got lines, but they don't list her. This book's not always. This book's kind of old. I'm sure someone else has done significant research on, Trekopedia or something where there's more information.
Yeah, there were also just a lot of little details in this episode, like the security officers that are with them. Yeah. They at some point take some uniforms and are dressed up as the guards for the whatever they're called, which I thought was interesting. Just because usually they just kind of hang out in their regular outfits, but in this part they're just like. We're gonna be.
Well, they use them so they can wander around a little bit, and then.
And they use it for a trick too. They bring. I think they bring. Kirk
they pretend
with
to
them?
bring Spock, I think.
Yeah.
And then they blow up another one of the disintegration chambers. With that, that's when they're trying to help Kirk. In the meantime, Kirk does the whole. I do like that scene where Kirk goes to see Amir 7. In his office or whatever it is, and he's like, "Won't you have a drink, Captain?"
Yeah.
And I'm a barbarian, and they have that great little banter between their society, and he's like, "Just go get your communicators down the hall to the left," and he's like, "No, you're gonna come with me." And then they have we have one of those fight scenes where Kirk does the weird, throws his body into a guy, and, like stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah, he's just fighting him and gets, thrown into a wall, gets punched a bunch, gets pistol whipped, and then, gets taken to he didn't get to, he was going to get taken to a disintegration chamber.
Right.
And then that's when Spock does
Well,
the
they
move.
feel like they still need him because they need him to get the ship to beam down. Especially because they bring him back to, like the headquarters or whatever it is, the command room, and they're like, they make the mistake of bringing up, like, calling the ship.
Yeah.
And
that's where General
we have
Order
your
24.
captain, and then Kirk just jumps in action. He says, "Scotty, General Order 24 in 12 hours or whatever number of hours, 2 hours, whatever it was." And he's like, oh, he goes, "The only difference is I won't be here." Because then they say, "We're going to throw you into disintegration chamber." He's like, "Okay, the only difference is I'm just not going to see your society get destroyed."
Yeah.
And it's really is the only play he has left. Because he's got to, he's got to do something. So.
I was wrong. They didn't save Kirk with that ruse. They saved Fox with that.
Oh yeah, right.
Yeah,
right.
And then Fox is like, "All right, well, since the cards are on the table now, I'm gonna pick up a gun and
right."
What I like is like you got the two security officers, right? You got Spock in between them, right? So they're walking down a hallway. They're taking about 75% of the hallway with Spock and the two security officers, and then you have Fox's attendant,
right,
all the way at the edge,
right,
and he's the one that gets shot. Like, these guys are obviously not very good at doing war.
Right. Yeah, they're not really they're not doing anything covertly. They're literally just walking down the hall. And the weapons are lazy in this episode because they don't they only make a noise. We don't see any lasers. I mean, obviously there were limitations of budget in the 1960s. This probably would have been very expensive to have like a hallway battle. And we watched Next Generation and Enterprise, and they have phaser battles on a regular basis. Where this one would make a lot less sense to.
Yeah, that had to be a budget thing because they've used phasers before.
Yeah, but we don't really see a lot of phaser firefights. Like on Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, where they're doing it multiple times, where they pretty much would be like, I fire a phaser, and that would be the extent of it. Not going to be like a phaser fight, so to speak.
Yeah, they seem to prefer the art of getting in close and settling it with their fists.
Yeah, which is, I'm sure there's a little bit of, cowboy diplomacy, which we like.
Yeah.
So, I like the fact that I like the way this works out, and then once again they get in there and they destroy the computer, and Spock, in an hour, he assesses the network capabilities of this computer in about 12 seconds, and then destroy this one, and they'll all go. And then one guy, I like the one guy's like, no, please don't. Like the one guy, they gave him one extra line, because the guy should say, hey, no, this is my society here,
He's like, wait, stop. But what I liked is that I'm kind of thinking of it's kind of like if we had developed nuclear bombs, right? And everybody had nuclear bombs, and then we just kind of agreed that we would wage war this way.
Right.
What Kirk basically introduced to this society was mad doctrine, right? Just mutually assured destruction.
Sure.
As a way of brokering peace between the two sides.
But my understanding was that they were using real bombs at one point, and their societies were both dying, and that was the peace solution 500 years ago, because the planets were dying, and they were starving, and someone decided, well, we don't really want to have peace, but we'll just have this, it's a kind of a weird thing. Yeah. In terms of how this happened, we don't really have a lot of information exactly, but it's a great MacGuffin to determine how it's war games. It's basically war games. It's kind of like the Matthew Broderick movie, except they're actually waging real war, with computers. And it's an interesting thing that this was this society's solution to war.
Yeah. I mean, I liked Spock's line in this when he's like, there's a certain logic to it, and the chancellor or whatever says, oh, so you agree? And he's like, I do not agree. I just understand.
I just understand. Yeah. And there's even that thing later in the episode. I think at the end there's the typical scene where they get back to the ship and they do the Mr. Spock, you would have made an excellent computer. Is that this episode?
Yeah.
I think that's like, well, thank you, Captain.
Yeah. Why, thank you, Captain.
It's like, this is a cool episode. This is I think it's well done.
Mm-hmm.
Fox actually comes around a little bit.
Yeah, he just kind of forgets the fact that they tried to murder him.
Yeah,
and
it's his job.
Yeah, I guess we'll I have experience in peace things, so let me help you broker a peace between your two people.
Yeah, he's like I think that was why he was there anyway. So that's kind of he doesn't have any ill will towards them killing his his buddy, his assistant, and he doesn't even really begrudge what Kirk did, because he recognizes that Kirk saved his life, but also that this was that now there can be peace.
Yeah.
Because Kirk does that great speech. He's like, that's all it takes. Okay, we're savages. We're barbarians. But we're just not going to kill today.
Yeah.
Today. That's all it takes. Mm-hmm. And he's like, you got to start somewhere, and you have to face that war is a messy, messy business. Mm-hmm. Oh, no, that's how this episode ends. Yeah. He's like, war is a very, very messy business. And he goes, Captain, you almost make me believe in luck. He says, Mr. Spock, you almost believe in miracles. That's how this episode ends.
Yeah.
It's a cool, I think it's an interesting, the Kirk acknowledges that humanoids are, we have a bloody history.
Yeah, I feel that the fact that, there's a quote you know, it is good. It is well that war is so horrific, lest we grow too fond of it, and that's basically what this script was for this episode. Like, it's just, you know, they've grown fond of the war,
Right.
you know, so it's easy to just accept that it's just a daily part of life for them because, you know, they don't see the suffering necessarily, you know.
Well, and when you brought it up earlier, the difference between like Kirk and Picard is 100 years of society. So if I think of two great presidents, you know, which I'm not going to get into the politics of it, but let's take let's take Teddy Roosevelt and any of your favorite presidents of the last 15, 20 years. Teddy Roosevelt handled interactions much differently than the presidents of today. So we could look at Teddy Roosevelt and say, well, what was he thinking? But for his time, he was a cowboy, like in a sense. He literally like charged San Juan Hill. Yeah. You know, like he's a rough rider. Like that was his history. I really like Teddy Roosevelt. And he was the right president for the right time. I guess you know what? Compare him to his cousin. FDR is a different president, and he's a great president in his right. But they're very different presidents of their time. Teddy Roosevelt was not a big diplomatist. FDR was. And, you know, a lot of people say, like, you know, the world would have been a very different place if FDR wouldn't have died at the end of the war. If FDR could have lived another 3-4 years, if Lincoln could have lived another 3-4 years, you know, American society the world would have been very different. So again, when you take those two, and I think that's the thing when you think about the way Kirk handles things, society, and then you advance Next Generation 100 years after. It's supposed to be 100 years, but I'm sure I got the numbers wrong. 100 years after the original Star Trek, Picard is more of a diplomat. The society's much more established, and he doesn't necessarily appreciate the way Kirk and the guys handled it back in the day. But back then, Kirk even says, like, we're the only guys out here. We I think that's the Taste of Armageddon episode. No, that's the. Is that the Gorn episode, or is that the Balance of Terror, where he's like, we're the only policemen around in these parts?
I believe that was Balance of Terror.
Yeah, like we have to do this. Like we have to, like we can't just let people get away with stuff like that's not. And again, like in the future, you know, Picard's enterprise. So Picard has the luxury of being a diplomat.
Yeah, he's got.
Kirk doesn't.
Yeah, the Federation at that point is very established. It's very powerful.
Right.
It's a regional power. There's, you know, the borders are well secured.
Yeah.
So it's like, you know, you have the luxury of being like, okay, let's sit back and talk about this, you know, rather than Kirk, you know, where you're just a lone ship out in the expanse, you know.
Yeah, most of the time on Next Generation, and even you feel like everybody knows who the Federation is. Where most of the time on the original series, we don't know. A lot of these planets don't know what the Federation is. It's not far enough along yet. So, I mean, that's kind of like, again, I think applies to why these episodes are written. And again, they were also written for their time. They were written for the 60s. And you know, people were very nervous about dying tomorrow in a nuclear war. Like, we were. Like, that was not me. I'm not old enough. But, like, but that was a thing. I mean, you know, like, hunker under your desk. That'll work. You know.
Yeah, that was definitely a central theme of this episode was just, you know, well, what's a solution for destructive war? And, you know, instead of diplomacy, these people chose another almost even more destructive path in the long run.
Which is why you brought up that great line where Spock says, well, I understand it.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't think that's a good idea, but I understand the logic of it. I don't agree with the logic of it, but I think it's a good idea. You know, for you guys it worked.
Yeah, he knows why it's happening. He just doesn't.
And he says, well, you know, like you took a big risk. He says, really? He says one of their attacks would have killed whatever. He says they've been killing that many a year for 500 years. He says I thought it was a calculated risk because I thought that if they faced real war, if this level of comfort was taken out, that would change their mindset. And he because I think he like he doesn't hate everybody. Like sometimes Kirk wants to he hates. You can tell he's just like these people. He despises them. Where I don't think he necessarily despises Seven, Amar Seven, whatever his name is. I think he just like this guy, like, dude, you gotta like, this isn't working for your society. Like, he wants you to fix your society. I mean, he's mad at him because they want to kill his crew.
Yeah.
But I think at the end of the day, he is more of he does diplomacy in his own, cowboy diplomacy way, which Captain Kirk's famous for.
Yeah, he blows up the thing instead of convincing them not to use it anymore.
Yeah, right. Like, okay, I tried to get you to listen to me, but okay, I'm gonna make you. And again, is this a Prime Directive violation?
There's no evidence that the society wasn't advancing, but I think this is a Prime Directive violation, yeah. Like, it's the internal politics of a independent society.
So does he get away with it because he ended up being an advocate that ended up leading to the peace, the end of that war? Although, here's the difference, though. They were sent there to broker a treaty.
Yeah.
So in a sense, he found a way to broker the treaty. And I think Fox is going to back him. So I think he won't get in trouble. He wouldn't get, obviously he's not going to get in trouble. But it's an interesting thing. I think in this situation, Fox will say, well, this society was literally using, like a computer to tell people to commit suicide. So maybe in that would be the thing, like, no, we showed them what the horror of wars were, so we were able to help them, find a peaceful solution and end the war. So they did at the end the war.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, we assume they ended the war. It was hopeful. I think it was.
I'm
called.
sure it's fine.
Yeah. But like, I just like that one line where he's like, he basically just says, well, you're terrified of this. You are. Right. I can see you shaking right now.
Right.
I'm paraphrasing, but what do you think they're feeling right now?
Right.
All on the other side of the solar system.
Right. And then he says, like, talk to Vendikar. Like, they're going to be just as horrified as you are. And he's like, if I were you, I'd start building bombs.
Yeah.
It's kind of like he does that weird, like, over the top. Yeah, I'm a warrior, but then he like softens it up, like, call them, like, they're horrified too. End this now, and
that reminds me of something they said right at the end of the episode.
Right.
That really kind of exemplified that. They said, we do have a direct line to the Vendikar,
right,
but we haven't used it in 300 years.
Right.
Which just really hammers home that complacency with this situation.
I hope it's not on a battery.
Yeah.
It's like your cell phone. I forgot to charge the direct line to Vendikar.
Yeah, the red phone wasn't
charged. They're out to lunch. Nobody answers. Because they could be on a different schedule. Maybe maybe it's the middle of the night on Vendikar when they call. It's funny that everything is always at the same time, right? It's always at the same time. And I was going to say, like, it's always funny that, like, things are always at, like, the same. And they always, like, that's why one of the things I loved about Deep Space Nine, that the rotation of Bajor was 26 hours equivalent to Earth, so it wasn't quite the same day. Yeah. I like the fact that they finally found a planet where the length of the day is a little bit different. And I like that they did that on I like that they did that on Next Generation and Deep Space Nine, where they tried to have, like, a standard time. Like, all Federation ships operate on a standard time. So if you beam from one ship on one side of the universe to the other side of the universe, they're both 5 o'clock.
Yeah.
Like, they're all on the same. So if you're reaching out to another thing, like, they're up too. So they're like, so even because obviously if you're orbiting a planet, one of those timelines is going to line up with yours. But I feel like they follow kind of a timeline there, which is, except in Deep Space Nine, because of the Deep Space Nine, they're following a 26-hour day.
Yeah, it's a Bajoran station.
Right.
So,
which I always liked that. I thought that was a cool thing. And then, but even like on Deep Space Nine, or even in Next Generation, where, like, they would go to, like, the lights would dim and they would almost have, like, a light, like, everybody would else get a break, and then Data would still be working the bridge. Everybody else got the day off. Well, Data doesn't sleep, so I think I always assumed he worked, like, not 24 hours a day, because obviously he's playing the violin and stuff.
Yeah, he's got other things he likes to do.
But it seems like he would take a lot of night shifts.
That's what it seems like. It seems like he works, like, first and second shift, maybe.
Right.
But Like I think that the time in the like starship time is baked into the star dates.
Right.
Because like they really go like when they say what the star date is, it's like way more than what like just month, day, year would be or whatever it was.
Right.
So I assume they have time baked in there too.
I've tried to figure out some things one time. Like I got in I think I might have mentioned this. I got into like a debate with somebody when we were talking about the girl, like Finney's daughter, on Court Martial.
Yeah.
About like that girl should be 12 or 14, but she looks like she was played by a 28-year-old actress. And I got into like a big thing on one of the Star Trek Facebook pages. People were mad at me, and other people got what I was saying. But I'm like, he met Finney when he was in the academy, so he's 18, 19, and then now he's 34. He's 34 by the time Star Trek starts, because he becomes captain when he's 32. He's the youngest captain in Starfleet history, which is not mentioned on the original series. It's mentioned in other stuff. It's not mentioned, but it is canon that he's the youngest captain in Starfleet history, and that was again almost like a nod to JFK. That he's this new generation young people, and so like at most, if he met Finney and he was in the academy for a couple of years.
Yeah.
She's born when he's 20, like, so she's 14. Like, that's at most. Like, and I tried to figure out what like, there are like these weird, like, online, calculators, but I don't think they were consistent. I think in the beginning they were just making up numbers.
Yeah.
I don't think they were trying to, like, follow any type of continuity.
Yeah, no. There was a whole lot of conflicting statements.
Because nobody thought that there'd be two guys doing a podcast about it in 50, 60 years.
Yeah, I don't think anybody really expected that there would be whole convention centers filled with people dressed like us.
Was there anything that existed like this before this?
With this much of a cult following?
Yeah. What is there a cult following before this? So like
maybe Doctor Who.
But Doctor Who came about the same time.
Oh, I thought it was way older.
So a little bit older, but Doctor Who maybe, but that like you really couldn't watch Doctor Who in America until like Doctor Who starts in the 1960s, but they had fan clubs and everything. I guess probably the only thing would probably be like things like Howdy Doody and stuff, maybe. Like maybe there would be like some like kid clubs, like mail-in things, like because I know like Peter Capaldi, who played the Doctor, was a president of the Doctor Who fan club in his high school. So I'm sure there was that, but there probably were like autograph signings, but was there an event? Like I don't think there really was. Like
certainly not to this scale. Like maybe Lord of the Rings. Maybe like as a book series.
Yeah, like I mean, I don't think there was like if you think about TV shows and movies that came out in the 50s and 60s, like there wasn't like a Casablanca fan club, or like there wasn't there. I mean, right? There wasn't. I think Star Trek and maybe Doctor Who were probably, like I said, there was probably some like Flash Gordon type stuff, like Buck Rogers back into the 30s and 40s. But a lot of that was just fan clubs where you'd mail in. I don't know if there was a lot of events. I'm sure you could meet the actors. They probably had autograph signings. I'm sure they did all that. But I'm sure there was merch, because I know you can buy merch from Flash Gordon in the 40s. I'm sure you could buy merch. But there was nothing like this, where there was literally a convention where all these fans got together. And then, and literally, there were all these letter writing campaigns and things.
Maybe comic books. Like Comic-Con, when did that start? I don't know.
Not before Star Trek got started, because I went to a Star Trek convention at the Niagara Falls Convention Center in probably 1976, and I remember sitting there. That's the casino in Niagara Falls now, and I remember sitting there, and they showed like a half an hour film reel of bloopers from the original show. And I'm 90% sure Shatner and Roddenberry were there when they spoke. And there were thousands of people there. There was probably 4,000 or 5,000 people at this thing. I don't remember, like, again, I was a kid, so I don't remember. I'm sure there was tables where you could go and buy stuff.
Yeah.
I probably bought some things. I don't remember. If I did, I'd have to ask my brothers. But that was a pretty big deal. I remember going to that, and that was kind of, and I was already kind of cemented in Star Trek anyway. But I don't know, like it's just I don't. But obviously, no one expected that people would ask Captain Kirk what his locker combination was. You know, to look at his his medals and stuff.
Yeah.
And was it the same? I'm sure somebody has figured out whether this, because he opens it up a couple different times. And I wonder if he pressed the same buttons each time.
Yeah.
Nowadays, they would make sure that he pressed the same. Mm-hmm. There'd be a Bible that has like 2, 1, 9, 5, whatever.
They wouldn't have like the side thing have different buttons at different times.
My feeling is that changes.
Yeah.
Depending on it's like an app. You can change the settings on it. Like
it's like
we're in an IR storm. You hit the app control and it changes the eject pod. This button no longer. The same way you can save settings on your keyboard.
Yeah, it's like
software.
It's like what they did with Next Generation with the changing like glass keyboards, except it's they don't have the technology to do that back then. So it's instead it's just physical buttons that are meant to be like that, I guess. But yeah, I think
that kind of covers it. So our next episode, we're going to do our watch party with Space Seed.
I think that's a good idea. So. Yeah. So I think I really want to almost people have seen Space Seed, right? Like I almost just want to just pause it every once in a while, just like really talk about it.
I think that's a good idea. We'll stop and we'll talk about it. And
like it's not, we don't have to react to it because like I've seen it like 5 times in my life.
Yeah, I'm sure I've seen it more.
So I really want to just pause at moments because there's a lot of moments. Like I just watched this like last night, so there's so many moments where.
Admittedly, I haven't watched Space Seed in a long time. I've watched Wrath of Khan as recently as 3-4 months ago. I watched. I one day I was just bored. I was out of, and I watched. I was working on a computer and doing other stuff too, and I was getting up and doing things. But I watched 2, 3, 4 in one evening. I mean, I was doing other stuff. I was getting up and walking around. I think especially during Voyage Home. But I always liked that trilogy, and that people have always kind of decided that 2, 3, 4 are kind of a trilogy. And because it kind of wraps up with everything that happens. 2 leads to 3, 3 leads to 4, and 4 leads to them getting a new ship. Obviously Spock coming back from the dead and all that. But there's a lot of really cool things in Wrath of Khan, and I don't know, like I it's just such an. I mean, obviously, it's probably the most important Star Trek movie, even opposed to motion picture, because it really brought Star Trek back.
Mm-hmm.
I remember my friends and I going to see the original motion picture and not hating it, but being disappointed. That we didn't hear Captain Kirk say "Space: The Final Frontier." We didn't hear the music. There's one tiny reference. We weren't real fond of the costumes.
Yeah,
we loved the ship. Everybody loved the ship. We're not super fond of the story. It gets to some humanity, but it takes way too long to get to the humanity of V'ger and all that. And all in all, like, but when Wrath of Khan comes up, I mean, I would see Wrath of Khan in the movies like probably 4 or 5 times.
Yeah, I saw Wrath of Khan before I actually watched Star Trek. And I just remember it being a good movie, like without any of the additional
I think that
context.
movie I think it holds up.
Yeah.
I think the special effects hold up. Industrial Light and Magic did the special effects.
Well, yeah,
for that
they're
movie.
physical props.
Yeah,
they blow up physical things.
I mean, we probably were going off on. I'm sorry, I'm going off on. I always go off on a tangent. But I remember like sitting with my friend Rich, who I think listens to the podcast, and we went to see it, and I remember like the shot of the Enterprise almost colliding with the Reliant, or the Reliant almost colliding with the Enterprise, where like literally we've never seen. Obviously, Star Wars was out at this point, and we had seen Luke Skywalker and the Millennium Falcon go through asteroid belts and all that stuff. But we'd not seen two on the big screen, two big ass ships battling it out, and that's what I think why Wrath of Khan is so cool, because it's the first time we see two ships going at each other, and like at this level with full on phasers and damage to the ships. Because on the original series,
it's shaking.
Yeah, like the MacGuffin of the only time we ever saw a ship damaged was Doomsday Machine. The Doomsday Machine, and then. But they didn't do that on a regular basis. Like nowadays, we damage the model because it's only CGI anyway. But then we saw like a ship get literally wet parts of the ship get blown off, and the ships, things are falling off the bridge, and that's why I think Wrath of Khan is what we wanted, and it really kind of reset the Star Trek universe the way it should have been.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, I think what was it, Star Trek 5 that was being filmed at the same time as Next Generation?
They overlap. 4 and 5 and 6 are overlapping because there's definitely some pictures of the cast of Star Trek 5 interacting with the cast, because they were all filmed on the Paramount lot. But obviously in 6, Michael Dorn actually plays his grandfather in The Undiscovered Country.
I can't even remember the Undiscovered.
Undiscovered Country is the one where Nimoy helped write the script, and he had this concept of Chernobyl, taking the concept of Chernobyl and applying it to the Klingons.
Oh, right.
And that was and that's why that's why again, why I think people like 6 so much. I love 6.
Shields.
6 is my second favorite Star Trek movie of the original series movies. And I think when Nimoy said to, I think it was Nicholas Meyer, I got this great idea for Star Trek, for the last Star Trek movie, where we actually start to have peace with our bad guys. He goes, because we know in the future, Next Generation, and Nimoy knew this, that in the future, the Klingons and the Federation are friends now. Well, why? We don't. It's never really mentioned. We just kind of yada yada at Next Generation. So. Nimoy said to Paramount and Nicholas Meyer, I think he's like, why isn't the last Star Trek original series movie, let's make that about that Kirk and Spock and the gang, they're the ones that lead to the first real peace treaty. And if there's anybody that should lead to the first peace treaty, it should be Captain Kirk, whose son was literally murdered by a Klingon. And he goes, and we've got this economic, sociological disaster of Chernobyl going on in Russia at the time, which really led to the Soviet Union's collapse. Maybe that is, and since we always kind of thought of the Klingons as kind of being like the Russians, maybe that is a chance for us. And that was genius. I think that was great, and that's incredible sci-fi. So, and I think people have kind of forgotten the genesis of that movie, and they just watch the movie now, where maybe they don't appreciate the movie the way I do, because again, watching the movie within the time frame, kind of like your mom said in her email, it's cool that way,
Yeah, I'm excited to get to the movies.
Yeah.
So, any other thoughts on A Taste of Armageddon?
It's a good episode.
Yeah.
It's one I like, and it's got some great funny moments in it. It's got some, it's again, like we've talked about it before, like this show was written well. The acting, the directing is all really good. Like we see things and they're well established. You watch TV shows now, and I don't think they get this established so quickly. It takes them a year sometimes to get their footing, where I feel like this show was pretty much, we knew what the show was going to be 4 or 5 episodes in.
Yeah, even when it was even when the show was struggling technically, which it struggled a lot technically in the beginning, they always made a solid attempt to build a script that was worth producing. Which
the last thing I'll say about this episode and the episode before, no phasers, so to speak. Yeah. They blow up a computer, but there's not a lot of spaceship stuff. There's not. They're not even really on the spaceships in either of those episodes. And I think that sometimes was the best thing about Star Trek, because they didn't always have to be on the ship. I love the ship-centric episodes too, but if it was always, and I think that's kind of why Voyager struggles, because they're stuck on the ship. They can't just go down to planets very often. They do, and it's kind of forced because why are they there? They should be trying to get home.
Yeah.
Like it just like the premise for Voyager always threw me off because I always felt that they would struggle, and that was almost the reverse of that. Why people were like worried about Deep Space Nine because they weren't on a ship. They didn't even have a ship. They were stuck on a space station, which is almost the other thing, which is why people, I think why they brought the Defiant in and they had to do some things. But, I liked sometimes because we had this freedom on Star Trek to just have episodes that had nothing to do with them, with the Romulans or the Klingons or anything. It was just like, part of the exploration of which Star Trek was supposed to, which is Star Trek was about or is about.
Yeah, Star Trek has never really been about the ships. I mean, people like the ships.
Yes.
But it's not about the ships. It's about the people.
Right.
Which is why Deep Space Nine is so good, because it's only the people for a long time.
Yeah.
And
not just the 8 people in the credits or whatever it is.
Yeah.
It's all these other people, and that's why I love Deep Space Nine. I still think Deep Space Nine is the best sci-fi show of all time.
Yeah.
Best Star Trek show. I mean, I'm sure people disagree with that. I mean, I love the original series, but if we're going to talk about, and I'm always of the argument, well, you can't say that because the original series, if you didn't have the original series, you wouldn't have Deep Space Nine. So, okay, we'll put that aside because that's usually my argument. Like,
Well, you're allowed to like the sequel stuff more than what came before.
I mean, I love Next Generation. I don't dislike Next Generation. There's only a couple shows I'm not too fond of, but I'll watch them. Because they're still Star Trek, and there's still something in them that is watchable. There's a couple episodes I'm like that I have to skip of all these shows, and they're not the traditional ones that a lot of people don't like. I the ones I don't like, I like some of the terrible Star Trek episodes that people hate. I like some of those. I think they're funny. I just kind of like how bad they are. I enjoy like making fun of how bad they are sometimes.
Yeah, so, I get that.
Like brain in brain. What is brain? Like the Mr. Spock's brain episode. I love that episode. I think it's hilarious. I think it's so bad that it's so bad that it's good. Like it's just so campy. It almost is just running out of ideas.
Yeah, we'll see how you feel about that when we get to Tuvix.
I can't, yeah, we'll get there. We'll get to that. All right.
Well, some housekeeping. If you have any comments about The Seed, which we will be watching live, well, not live, but we'll be watching, pausing, discussing it next time.
Right.
If you have any comments, then in the format, like the better way to do it would be to discuss specific moments in the episode, because that's how the format that we're going to be doing when we do it. So. But I'll if you send something, I'll work it in somehow.
Sure, definitely,
I'll find a way to work it in.
Definitely.
Probably won't really answer. We'll probably wait till a normal episode to discuss more general topics, or if you have comments about a different episode.
Right.
But I want to thank everybody for watching and listening. This has been the Double Fist Punch podcast, and remember, clasp your hands together. And just
Live long and proud.